Hey Krishna. All glories to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Madhya Lila 11.214. Sanchadupa Deki Aram Bila Sankirtana Adicha Asi Sabare Dila Maya Chandana. Translation. After saying the Dupa Arti of the Lord, they all began congregational chanting. Then the Panditya, the superintendent of the temple, came and offered flower garlands and sandalwood pulp to everyone. 215. Sharidike Kari Sampradaya Karena Kirtana Madhe Nitya Kare Prabhu Sachira Nandana. Translation. 4 parties were then distributed in 4 directions to perform Sankirtana, and in the middle of them, the Lord himself, known as the son of Mother Sachi, began to dance. 216. Astamridanga Bhaje Batrisa Karatala Haridvani Kare Sabe Bale Bala Bala. In the 4 groups, there were 8 mridangas and 32 cymbals. Altogether, they began to vibrate the transcendental sound, and everyone said, "Very good, very good." 217. Kirtanera Dhvani Maha Mangala Utila Chaturdasa Loka Bari Brahmanda Bedila. Translation. When the tumultuous vibration of Sankirtana resounded, all good fortune immediately awakened, and the sound penetrated the whole universe through the 14 planetary systems. Text 218. Kirtana Arhambe Prema Utali Chalila Nila Chale Vasiloka Dana Aila. Translation. When the congregational chanting began, ecstatic love immediately overflooded everything, and all the residents of Jagannath Puri came running. 219. Kirtana de Kisabara Mane Haila Chamatkara Kabuna hi de ki arche Premera Bikara. Translation. Everyone was astonished to see such a performance of Sankirtana, and they all agreed that never before had Kirtan been so performed and ecstatic love of God so exhibited. 220. Tabe Prabhu Jagannatera Mandira Bediya Pradakshina Kari Bulena Nartana Kariya. Translation. At this time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu circumambulated the temple of Jagannath and continuously danced about the whole area. 221. Age pache ghane kare chari sampradaya achadira kale dare nityanandaroya. Translation. As the circumambulation was performed, the 4 kirtan parties sang in front and in the rear. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fell down to the ground, Sri Nityananda Roy Prabhu lifted him up. 222. Asrupulaka Kampasvedha Gambira Hunkara Premavikara deki loke chamatkara. Translation. While kirtan was going on, there was a transformation of ecstatic love and much tears, jubilation, trembling, perspiration, and deep resounding in the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Upon seeing this transformation, all the people present became very much astonished. 11.223. So 11.223. 223. Pikari darajini asunayane charidikera lokasaba karaye sirane. Translation. The tears from the eyes of the Lord came out with great force, like water from a syringe. Indeed, all the people who surrounded him were moistened by tears. (224) Vedanurja Mahaprabhu Karikata Chana Mandire Pache Rahi Karaye Kirtana. Translation. After circumambulating the temple, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for some time remained at the rear of the temple and continued his Sankirtana. Text 225. Chari dike chari sampradaya uchasvare gava madhye tanda bandrutya kare gora raya. Translation. On all four sides, the four Sankirtana groups chanted very loudly, and in the middle of Sri Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu danced, jumping high. (226) Bahuchana nrityakari prabhustira haila chari mahantere tabe nachite ajatile. Translation. After dancing for a long time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became still and ordered four great personalities to begin to dance. (227) Eka sampradaye nase nityanandaraye advaita charye nase ara sampradaye. Translation. In one group, Nityananda Prabhu began to dance, and in another group, Advaita Acharya began to dance. 228. Ara sampradayena se pandita vakshara Srivasa se ara sampradaya vitara. Translation. Vakresvara Pandit began to dance in another group, and in yet another group, Srivas Thakur began to dance. Text 229. Madherahi Mahaprabhu Karina Darshana Tahane Ka Esvarya Tandra Haila Prakatana. Translation. While this dancing was going on, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu watched them and performed a miracle. Text 230. Charidike nritya gita kareyata jana sabhedeke prabhu kare amare darshana. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stood in the middle of the dancers, and all the dancers in all directions perceived that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was looking at them. (231) Chari janera nritya dekhite prabhura abhilasa sehi abhilase kare Isparya Prakasha. Translation. Wanting to see the dancing of the four great personalities, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited this miracle of seeing everyone simultaneously. Darshane Avesha Tanra Deki Matra Jane Ke Manne Chaudi Ke Deke Iha Nahi Jane. Translation. Everyone who saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could understand that he was performing a miracle, but they did not know how it was that he could see on all four sides. (233) Purina Bhojaneyena Krishna Madhyasthane Chaudike Rasa Kakahe Amare Nehane. Translation. In his own pastimes in Vrindavan, when Krishna used to eat on the bank of the Yamuna and sit in the center of his friends, every one of the cowherd boys would perceive that Krishna was looking at him. In the same way, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu observed the dancing, everyone saw that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was facing him. (234) Rajakari Teye Ase Sannidhane Mahaprabhu Kare Tayer Dridha Alingane. Translation. When someone came by while dancing, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would tightly embrace him. (235) Mahanrutya Mahaprema Mahasankirtana Deki Prema Vesha Base Lila Chala Jana. Translation. Upon seeing the great dancing, great love, and great Sankirtana, all the people of Jagannath Puri floated in an ecstatic ocean of love. (236) Gajapati Rajasuni Kirtana Mahatva Atalika Chadi Deke Svagana Sahita. Translation. Hearing the greatness of the Sankirtana, King Prataparudra went up to the top of his palace and watched the performance with his personal associates. (237) Kirtana de Kiyara Jara Haila Chamatkara Prabhuke Milite Ukanta Bhadhila Apara. Translation. The king was very much astonished to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Kirtana, and the king's anxiety to meet him increased unlimitedly. (238) Kirtana Sampatye Prabhu Deki Pushpanjali Sarva Vaishnava Lana Prabhu Aila Vasa Chali. Translation. After the Sankirtana ended, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu watched the offering of flowers to the Lord Jagannath deity. Then he and all the Vaishnavas returned to his residence. (239) Andicha Aniyadila Prashara Vistara Sabhare Banityataha Dilena Isvara. Translation. The superintendent of the temple then brought large quantities of prasadam, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally distributed to all the devotees. (240) Sabhare Vidhayadila Karite Sayana Ehi Mata Lila Kare Sachira Nandana. Translation. Finally, they all departed to rest in bed. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the son of Sachimata, performed his pastimes. (241) Yavata Chila Sabe Mahaprabhu Sange Pratidina E Mata Kare Kirtana Range. Translation: as long as the devotees remained at Jagannath Puri with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the pastimes of Sankirtana was performed with great jubilation every day. 242. Eita Kailium Prabhura Kirtana Vilasa Yepe Ihasune Haya Chaitanya Radasa. Translation: in this way I have explained the Lord's pastimes of Sankirtana, and I bless everyone with this benediction. By listening to this description, one will surely become a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. 243. Sri Rupa Raghunatha Pariyara Asa Chaitanya Charitamrta Kahe Krishna Dasa. Translation: praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I Krishna Das narrate the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrta, following in their footsteps. Purport: thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrta Madhya Lila 11th chapter, describing the Veda Kirtana pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Madhya Lila chapter 12, the cleansing of the Gundicha temple. In his Amrita Pravahabhasya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur summarizes this chapter as follows. The king of Orisha, Maharaja Prabhupada, tried his best to see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Nityananda Prabhu and the other devotees informed the Lord about the king's desire. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would not agree to see him. At that time, Sri Nityananda Prabhu devised a plan, and he sent a piece of the Lord's outward garment to the king. The next day, when Ramananda Roy again entreated Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to see the king, the Lord, denying the request, asked Ramananda Roy to bring the king's son before him. The prince visited the Lord dressed like a Vaishnava, and this awakened remembrance of Krishna. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu delivered the son of Maharaj Prabhupada. After this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the Gundicha temple before the Ratha Yatra took place. When he took his bath at the Indrayumna lake and partook of prasadam in the garden nearby, while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the temple of Gundicha, a Gaudiya Vaishnava washed the lotus feet of the Lord and drank the water. This incident is very significant, for it awoke within the devotee ecstatic love. Then the son of Advaita Prabhu, named Gopala, fainted during Kirtana, and when he did not come to his senses, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu favored him by awakening him. There was also some humorous talk between Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu during prasadam. Advaita Prabhu said that Nityananda Prabhu was unknown to anyone, and that it was not the duty of a householder Brahmana to accept dinner with a person unknown in society. In answer to his humorous statement, Sri Nityananda Prabhu replied that Advaita Acharya was a monist, and that one could not know how his mind could be turned by eating with such an impersonalist. The conversation of these two Prabhus, Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu, carried a deep meaning that only an intelligent man can understand. After all the Vaishnavas finished their luncheon, Swarup Damodar and others took their prasadam within the room. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took great pleasure when he saw the Jagannath deity after the period of the deity's retirement. At that time, Lord Chaitanya was accompanied by all the devotees, and all of them were very pleased. Text 1. Shri Gundicha Mandiram Atma Vrindai Samarjayam Chalanta Sagura Svachitta Vachchitalam Ujvalam Cha Krishno Paveso Payikam Chakara. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed and cleansed the Gundicha temple with his devotees and associates. In this way, he made it as cool and as bright as his own heart, and thus he made the temple a befitting place for Lord Sri Krishna to sit. Text 2. Jaya Jaya Gaura Chandra Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakti Vrinda. Translation. All glories to Gaura Chandra, all glories to Nityananda, all glories to Advaita Chandra, all the glories to all the devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 3. Jaya Jaya Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Gana Shakti Deha Kariyena Chaitanya Varnana. Translation. All glories to the devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, headed by Srivas Thakur. I beg their power so that I can properly describe Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 4. Vorve Dakshina Hoite Prabhu Yabe Aila Tanre Milite Gajapati Utkanti Haila. Translation. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned from his South Indian tour, Maharaja Prataparudra, the king of Orisha, became very anxious to meet him. Text 5. Kataka hoite patri dila sarvam matani prabhura agya hoya yari deki barayai. Translation. The king sent a letter from his capital, Kataka, to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, entreating him to obtain the Lord's permission so that he could go and see him. Text 6. Bhattacharya Likhila Prabhura Agya Nahaila Punara Piraja Tanre Patri Pataila. Translation. Replying to the king's letter, the Bhattacharya wrote that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had not given his permission. After this, the king wrote him another letter. Text 7. Prabhura Nikateya Cheyata Bhakta Gana Oralagi Tansabare Kariha Nivedana. Translation. In this letter, the king requested Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, please appeal to all the devotees associated with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and submit this petition to them on my behalf. Text 8. Sehi Saba Dehalu Morehana Sadaya Oralagi Prabhupade Karibe Vinaya. Translation. If all the devotees associated with the Lord are favorably disposed toward me, they can submit my petition at the lotus feet of the Lord. Text 9. Chansabara prashade mile shri prabhura paya prabhu kripa vinamora rajana hibaya. Translation. By the mercy of all the devotees, one can attain the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Without his mercy, my kingdom does not appeal to me. Text 10. Yadi more kripana karibe gora hari rajachari yogi hai babhikari. Translation. If Gaurahari, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, will not show mercy to me, I shall give up my kingdom, become a mendicant, and beg from door to door. Text 11. Bhattacharya patri dekhi chintita hana bhattagana pasha gela sei patrilana. When Bhattacharya received this letter, he became very anxious. He then took the letter and went to the devotees of the Lord. Text 12. Sabhare muliya kahila raja vivarana piche sei patri sabare karaila darashana. Translation. Sovereign Bhoma Bhattacharya met with all the devotees and described the king's wishes. Then he presented the letter to all of them for inspection. Text 13. Patri dekhi sabara mani haila vishmaya Prabhupada Gajapatira Eta Bhakti Haya. Translation. Upon reading the letter, everyone was astonished to see that King Prataparudra had so much devotion for the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. 14. Sabe keha Prabhu Tandre Kabuna Milibe Ami Saba Kahiyari Dukase Manibe. Translation. The devotees gave their opinion and said, the Lord will never meet the king, and if we requested him to do so, the Lord would surely feel very unhappy. Text 15. Sarvamboma kahe sabe chala ekabara milite na kahibe kahiba raja yavahara. Translation. Sovereign Bhoma Bhattacharya then said, we shall go once again to the Lord, but we shall not request him to meet the king. Rather, we shall simply describe the good behavior of the king. Text 16. Etabali sabegela mahaprabhurastane kahite unmukha sabe nakahe vachane. Translation. Having thus reached a decision, they all went to the place of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There, although ready to speak, they could not even utter a word. Text 17. Prabhu kahe ki kahite sabara agamana dekhiye kahite chaha natkaha ki karana. Translation. After they arrived at Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's place, the Lord, seeing them, said, what have you all come here to say? I see that you want to say something, but you do not speak. What is the reason? Text 18. Nityananda kahe tomaya chahi nivite na kahile rahite nari kahite bayachite. Translation. Nityananda Prabhu then said, we want to tell you something. Although we cannot stay without speaking, we are still very much afraid to speak. Text 19. Yogya tomaya sabachahi nivedite tomana milile raja chahe yogi haite. Translation. We want to submit before you something that may or may not be befitting. The matter is this. Unless he sees you, the king of Orisha will become a mendicant. Text 20. Kane mudra lain muni haiba bikari raja boga nahe chite vina Gaura Hari. Translation. Nityananda Prabhu continued, the king has decided to become a mendicant and accept the sign of a mendicant by wearing an ivory earring. He does not want to enjoy his kingdom without seeing the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Purport. In India, there is still a class of professional mendicants who are very much like the gypsies of Western countries. They know some magical art and mystical processes, and their business is to beg from door to door, sometimes pleading and sometimes threatening. Such mendicants are sometimes called the yogis and sometimes kanafata yogis. The word kanafata refers to one who has put a hole in his ear to wear an earring made of ivory. Maharaja Prabhupada was so depressed by not getting to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he decided to become such a yogi. Ordinary men think that a yogi must have an ivory earring in his ear, but this is not the sign of a real yogi. Maharaj Prabhupada also thought that to become a mendicant yogi, one must wear such an earring. "21. Dekhiba se mukha chandra nayana bariya, dariba se pada padma hridaye tuliya." Translation. Nityananda Prabhu continued, the king also expressed his desire to see the moon-like face of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his eyes' full satisfaction. He would like to raise the lotus feet of the Lord to his heart. 22. Yadyapi suniya prabhura komalat hayamana tatapi bahire kahe nistura vachana. Translation. Hearing all these statements, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind was certainly softened, but externally he wished to speak some harsh words. 23. Tomasa bara icha e amare lana rajake miliha ihan kata kete giya. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I can understand that you all desire to take me to Kataka to see the king. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is naturally the reservoir of all kindness, and as soon as he heard the statement made by the king, his heart immediately softened. Thus the Lord was ready to go see the king even at Kataka. He did not even consider allowing the king to come from Kataka to Jagannath Puri to see him. It is significant that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so kind that he was ready to go see the king at Kataka. Apparently, it was never expected that the king wanted to see the Lord at his place, but by the way of being externally harsh, the Lord indicated that if all the devotees so desired, he would go to Kataka to see the king. 24. Aramarta takuka loke karibe nindana loke rahuta modara karibe varchana. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, what to speak of spiritual advancement? All the people will blaspheme me, and what to speak of all the people? Damodar would chastise me. 25. Tomasa bara agyaya amina mili rajare damodara kaheyabe militabe tanre. Translation. I shall not meet the king at the request of all the devotees, but I shall do so if Damodar will give his permission. Purport. From the spiritual point of view, a sannyasi is strictly forbidden to see materialistic people, especially a king who is always engaged in counting pounds, shillings, and pence. Indeed, the meeting between a sannyasi and a king is always considered abominable. A sannyasi is always subjected to public criticism, and a small fault on his part is taken seriously by the public. People actually expect a sannyasi to preach and not take part in any social or political matters. If a sannyasi is subject to public criticism, his preaching will not be fruitful. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically wanted to avoid such criticism so that his preaching work would not be hampered. It so happened that while the Lord was talking to his disciples at that time, The devotee Damodar Pandit was present. This Damodar Pandit was a very faithful devotee and a staunch lover of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whenever there was anything that might touch or taint the character of the Lord, Damodar Pandit would immediately point it out, not even considering the exalted position of the Lord. It is sometimes said that fools rush where angels dare not, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to point out Damodar Pandit's foolishness in coming forward to criticize the Lord. This is why the Lord stated that Damodar Pandit would give him permission, he would go to see the king. There was a deep meaning in this statement, for it is a warning that Damodar should not dare criticize the Lord anymore, for it was not befitting his position as a devotee. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was considered the guide and spiritual master of all the devotees living with him. Damodar Pandit was one of them, and the Lord rendered Damodar Pandit a special favor by warning him to avoid criticizing him any further. A devotee or a disciple should never attempt to criticize the Lord or his representative, the spiritual master. (26) Damodara kahe tumi svantantra isvara kartavya karatavye sabha tomara gochara. Translation: Damodar immediately replied, "My Lord, you are the fully independent Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since everything is known to you, you know what is permissible and what is not permissible." 27. Ami kun shudra jiva tomake vidhi diva apani mili betandre taho dekiba. Translation: I am merely an insignificant jiva, so what power do I have to give directions to you? By your own personal choice, you will meet with the king. I shall see it. 28. Raja tumare sneha kare, tumi sneha vasa, tamra sneha karabe tandre tomara parasha. Translation: The king is very much attached to you, and you are feeling affection and love toward him. Thus I can understand that by virtue of the king's affection for you, you will touch him. 29. Yadyapi isvaratumi parama svantantra tatapi svabhavehau prima paratantra. Translation: Although you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead and are completely independent, still you are dependent on the love and affection of your devotees. That is your nature. Text 30. Nityananda kahe arche haya konja ana ye tomare kahe kara raja dara shana. Translation: Nityananda Prabhu then said, "Who is there in the three worlds who can ask you to see the king?" 31. Kintu anuragi lokera svabhava ekaya istana paila nija pranase chadaya. Still, isn't it the nature of an attached man to give up his life if he does not attain his desired object? 32. Yagnika brahmani sabata hate pramana Krishna lagi pati age chari leka prana. Translation: For instance, some of the wives of the Brahmins who were performing sacrifices gave up their lives in the presence of their husbands for the sake of Krishna. Purport: This refers to the day that Lord Sri Krishna and his cowherd boys and flocks of animals were present in the pasturing grounds near Mathura. At that time, the cowherd boys, being a little hungry, requested food, and Lord Krishna asked them to go to the Brahmanas who were engaged nearby in performing yajna, or sacrifice, and to get some food from that yajna. Being so ordered by the Lord, all the cowherd boys went to the Brahmanas and asked them for food, but they were denied. After this, the cowherd boys begged food from the wives of the Brahmanas. All these wives were very much devoted to Lord Krishna in spontaneous love, and as soon as they heard the request of the cowherd boys and understood that Krishna wanted some food, they immediately left the place of sacrifice. They were very much chastised for this by their husband, and they were ready to give up their lives. It is the nature of a pure devotee to sacrifice his life for the transcendental loving service of the Lord. 33. Ekayukti acheyadi kara avadhana tumina mili leha tandre rahe tandra prana. Translation. Nityananda Prabhu then submitted one suggestion for the Lord's consideration. There is a way, he suggested, by which you need not meet the king, but which would enable the king to continue living. Thus concludes our reading for today. All glories to Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Nirmalachari Maharaj Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
धन्यवाद। जय श्रीमान कृष्ण केशव प्रभु की।